Your lows will be your lows, your highs can be super highs. But I've come to realize, like, don't let the lows be so low and don't let your highs give you an airhead.
You determine the cadence, you determine the choice, and what you choose last week doesn't have to be the same choice that you make next week.
Either live life just parroting what we see other people do and not get the results we want, or we put in the time to be the driver.
That is a secure attachment that your child has because they're relying on you as their provider, as their means of safety, and you'd rather have that person be you than another colleague of theirs.
Yeah.
Here's Deep. He's got 2 kids. His wife's a pharmacist. He's a dentist, and he's got an online clothing business. What else could we do if we just had a strong enough purpose behind us?
There are certain people that are just so special that they jump off the page. Like when you see them in life or on the screen, they're just that special. Have you ever had an experience like that?
I have, and I'm actually having that experience right now because I think I was watching the Eagles play the Commanders recently, and while the game was not so fun for the Commanders, there was a commercial during the game that caused me to turn and look to Jay and be like, you have no idea what we're going to do in July. And you want to know that commercial was for the new release of the Superman movie, my favorite all-time superhero. And lo and behold, we have Superman on today's show. Welcome to the show. Be your own superhero, Deep Shah.
Dinesh, thanks so much for having me, guys.
We're so excited you're here. Finally.
Yeah.
Okay. So if anybody hops onto Instagram, they can see you are first and foremost a dad. You're a husband, you're a pediatric dentist, you're the founder of Labels, which is a clothing company that has a mission to help kids break stereotypes and labels that are placed on them. But there's a lot more to you than that. And so I'm excited that you're bringing all of your magic to the show today.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. So everyone, Deep is one of those people that is such a shining light. I'm grateful to have met him throughout the pandemic. I think we met after the pandemic, but I have to say that, a lot of people give social media a bad rap. It's like it sucks your attention. It is filled with negativity. It is addicting. You should stay away from social media. And if, there's this prevailing thought that if you're doing anything important, social media does not belong on your phone because you're so laser focused on your life's purpose, and social media is going to rot your brain. But I think this conversation is proof that social media, like anything else, is a tool. Money, fire is a tool, water is a tool, concrete is a tool, knives are tools. But social media is what you get out of it is what you put into it. And if you guys remember back in like the AOL Instant Messenger days, you had cyber buddies, and then you had an IRL, like in real life buddy. And so Deep Shah is someone that I have come to respect through a totally virtual connection, and now we're connected in real life, and all 3 of us couldn't be stronger friends. So we're so grateful that he's putting his stuff out there and that we were able to connect. And I hope this conversation inspires you to recognize that there are amazing people in parts of the world that you have access to if you left your neighborhood, and the fastest way to do that is through your phone.
I'm like overwhelmed with the love and gratefulness. I'm so grateful. Thank you guys so much for the kind words. It really means a lot. And before we got on air here, I was talking to Seema about the same thing, how I know a lot of people who just despise social media. And I think to realize that there's so much good that can come out of it, and the connections that you can make on that platform are tremendous. And I think, just like you said, what you get out of it is what you put into it. And I think it's just one of those customized widgets that's in your tool belt that you can use it to really make a big difference, a positive difference in your life. It can definitely take you the other way too, if you're just scrolling all the time. But I think those people who are very intentional with what they're looking for and the platform that they want to create, I think have extrapolated nothing but good things out of it. And so I'm super lucky and blessed to have met both of you through Instagram. And look at this, like here we are. It's like kind of neat how life comes full circle. I'm
Yeah.
just glad, like I said, we're also connected outside of this as well. But it's so cool to be a part of your show, of this thing that I know you guys were thinking about, doing. And here you guys are, like, launched, the podcast, and it's been a hit. And you guys got, just your award, last year. And so
Yeah.
a big congrats to you guys
Thank you.
for doing what you're doing and sharing your stories and bringing some awesome guests onto this episode, onto the show for their episodes.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. When you were telling that story, it reminded me of a couple days ago, and there was a symbolism or analogy that I'd like to share. My son performed at the Wizards halftime show, and to do that, he needed to wear the sequin jacket, this gold sequin jacket. And we were walking down the street of Washington D.C., and he's in his like really flowy silver pants, right, for the dance, and with this gold sequin jacket. And I was behind him walking. And it really was an analogy for life. And this is the analogy. He's walking down the street, people are looking at him, everyone's dressed in winter clothes. And then after about 50 steps of continuing to walk, he what emerges is a sea of other little boys wearing gold and silver, and he instantly blends in and is part of the group, right? And I think that what we have figured out, and as obvious as it is if you're on social media and you're just consuming, making the quick switch to being a creator and putting things out there is part of that journey. And if you keep putting your things out there, what ends up happening is that you find the people that you
Mhm.
resonate with, and you're no longer on an island feeling like, hey, no one understands me. Why can't I find people that get along with me? Everyone is interested in their own things. Like, where's my tribe? With these days, with so many things that have moved virtually, it's never been easier to find your tribe. If you have a gold sequin jacket, just keep walking. You'll
Yeah.
find
Oh,
all
Well
of
that
them.
said.
belongs on a bumper sticker or
Yeah.
something. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's well said.
no,
Yeah.
I think to that note, take a look at what it is on your feed, because that's really going to be a quick measure of, where you are, and really kind of give you insight into, do you want to be here? Is this what you want to have on your feed, right? If you're into health and fitness and nutrition, and that's what's popping up for you, and you're feeling motivated and inspired and connected, great, then you're on the right path for you.
Hmm.
But if you're, maybe stuck and you're looking for the trolls, right? Like, you're not that you're trolling, but you're like looking for those comments, and you're looking for, subconsciously looking for the catastrophic, like, oh my gosh, I'm feeling the stress and somebody else feels it too, in a way that is not going to help you step out of it. Just pause and look. If you're good there, great. But you can also find people that jump off of the page. I remember I was sitting outside. It was like really hot. It was in the middle of the pandemic. It was late at night. I probably should have been in bed. But Manish and I were sitting outside, and I was scrolling on my phone, and I was new to Instagram, and I felt so stupid on there. I felt dumb talking to my phone, and it felt awkward. And the superhero dentist just boom pops out. Like, it may as well have just like jumped off the page, and I couldn't help but click on it, right? And oh wow, there's this Gujarati dentist. Hey, that's like me, and just reaching out, and you responded right away. Hey, I'm here. And that immediate connection was just so special. And listeners, the reason Deep is so special to me is because he was one of the first Instagram Desi creators to subconsciously give me permission to do things differently. We did some really fun, creative stuff during the pandemic on Instagram. We'll talk about that a little bit later. I think we're always looking for that inspiration, and it's right there.
Well, I appreciate it. That's very heartfelt, and that means a lot to me. I'm sure we'll dive into this, but like, the last year or so, I took a lot of time out and, like, to be with my family and just kind of get my life back on the right track the way I felt I wanted to. And there were times you look back and you're like, hey, like, I've got people in my corner that I know that are rooting for me. The coolest part is when you surround yourself with people, when you succeed and when you thrive, they're just right there rooting for you along the way. And I think that's so hard to find. It's easier said than done. And I know that just through the conversations that I've had with both of you, I just know there's always been tremendous support. There's always been, I know, remember Dinesh saying, hey, listen, dude, if you need anything, like, let me know. Like, let me know. And Seema, like, we've had talks and we've opened up about, things. And like, it's just, it's people laugh. Like, what you found that online, it's like, yeah, you find genuinity online. You find people who really care online. And I owe a lot of kudos to both of you for coming into my life and still being a part of my life, and picking me up during moments where I really needed it.
We're so glad to be connected. But let's get into the episode. Before we get going, though, I just did a quick Google for Deep Shah Pediatric Dentist, 4 words, and what I found was an extremely handsome man who is extremely educated and well thought of. He's at UPenn Dentistry. He is posing with athletes, lots of good-looking people around him, and an amazing dad. But what are we not getting? What are we not getting from Google or from your Instagram?
Yeah, that's a great question. Someone that doesn't know me probably doesn't realize that I had ALL as a kid, acute lymphoblastic leukemia. And I think having cancer as a kid, overcoming it, I've been in remission for the last 32 years, 33 years, so since the age of 5. That has just been like my beacon of light, just to know that I've got a second chance at life, so to speak. I've been fortunate, not to go through chemotherapy and radiation, and I responded well to methotrexate, which is like one of the drugs.
Mm-hmm.
But as I grew up and I went, I would go to St. Christopher's in Philadelphia, and I'd go see my hemonc team routinely up until like the age of 19. But I remember seeing a bunch of these kids, right? They're hooked up to IV poles, totally bald, and you would think that they're miserable, but they're the opposite. They were laughing, they were in good spirits. And as I got, into my teens and, grew, into 15, 16, 17, and starting having a little bit more of a different perspective on this, I realized that this ward is like a safe haven. It's a beacon of light for these kids. And here I am just getting blood work drawn and like, kind of dreading it at times. And these kids are here going through a lot more than that. And I look back at that, I look at, man, I'm able to have, luckily, I had my fertility. I have, able to start a beautiful family. I wasn't impaired cognitively in terms of like, reading ability or math ability, which sometimes can be the issue with some of these immunocompromised kids. And I sit there, I'm like, what am I getting upset about? What am I getting flustered about? And when I find hard times, I really kind of turn back to that, and I realize it's the journey, right? We each have our own journey, but that's my journey, and I think that's the journey that keeps me going. That ultimately allowed me to pursue the field that I'm in right now, to give back to kids in pediatric dentistry.
Thank you
Yeah.
for sharing that. And we're
Sure.
so glad to hear that, the ALL has resolved, and the perspective that you took away from it is one of empowerment, and it just gives you such a brighter light to shine.
What made you take that perspective? Because yes, you said that you saw other kids and they're bright and happy and all of those wonderful things. When you see difficult situations come to people, I've seen it both ways. I've seen it where people are like, well, I had this happen to me and therefore my life is like this. But then there's other people who are like, yeah, it's part of my story. I want to find that inspiration, that joy. It gives them real perspective in an empowering way versus a disempowering way. I don't think that is necessarily taught. I think it's human nature to, find the misery and clot there, unless you intentionally do otherwise. What made you land on this side of it?
Yeah, that's deep. No pun intended. But I think about one story that comes to mind. And just like everybody, I've had hard days. I've contemplated suicide. I've contemplated I've been depressed. I've contemplated like ending life. Like, just, I think things that a lot of people actually have thought about at some point in time. And I'm no different. And I've thought about that, just kind of going through struggles on my own and family struggles, prior to having kids and things of that nature. And I remember being actually in a Macy's, with Dwani, who's my wife, and we're going clothing shopping. And there is an African American lady who just comes around the corner, and I'm like demoing the shirt and pants that I'm wearing. And I go back around the corner to change, and she comes out. She's waiting there, and she was staring at me. And she looks at me. She goes, "I just want to let you know, you're really special, and the world needs you." And Dwani's there, and we're both like, "WTF?" Like,
Yeah.
it's just super creepy, right? But then you think about that, and you're like, "What does this lady know that I don't know?"
Yeah.
Right? It was just an angel that was sent above at the right time. I was just like coincidental or whatever. It was just too freaky to avoid. And that happened twice. I've had someone else say the same thing, total stranger. And I
Wow.
think that's when you realize, you're like, hey, I am a gift. I'm not perfect. And the goal is not to be perfect, but I have a gift. And it's my job to let that gift impact as many people as I can genuinely impact. And that's kind of what put me into this trans of, hey, let me really reassess, right? The hardest thing to do is to go back in the past and to open up wounds, because that's like the hardest thing. Like, that's where growth happens. But it's the hardest way to grow, is to really analyze and reassess your life, choices you've made, the hurt you've caused, open those wounds, but then really heal from them. And
Yeah.
it took me some time to do that. But when I did that, it was very hard, but it was very transformative. That's what I think has put me on that quote unquote other side, to really look at this from a holistic standpoint and to realize, hey, like, we're all flawed. I mean, it's just the part of it, but flawed doesn't mean bad. The road of life for all of us is we're always under construction. We're always trying to get better. We're better in our teens than we were like in our single digits. We're better in our 30s than we were in our 20s. And the goal is to keep improving and going that route. And so I think once I had that perspective in mind, I realized, like, you're the creator of what you want to do. And yes, you will have depression. You'll hit every emotion along the way. Your lows will be your lows. Your highs can be super highs. But I've come to realize, like, don't let the lows be so low, and don't let your highs
Right.
give you an airhead.
Yeah.
Stay even keeled as much as you can. And I think for me, that's been the right way to approach life.
So good. I know with listeners in our very first episode, I think I shared something similar. Not that I was, in a dark place or anything, but I was definitely in an egoic place. As you talked about the lady that, had her special message for you. And I keep thinking about my angel that was, I shared about with the first episode, she was like 97. And we had gone to Hawaii. It was like, we'd been married a year, and it was our first like few hours in Hawaii. And Hawaii at that point was one of our like dream checklists. Like, Monisha and I didn't grow up with a lot of money. The fact that we were there, we did it on our own, like all that stuff. And this woman is like teaching hula dancing at 97 years old, and she's moving. And, I'm like, wow, this lady doesn't look like 97 at all. And I couldn't help but ask her, what is going on here? And I remember her message of, you can choose to be happy now. Like, just be happy. That is the secret to life. And of course, at the ripe old age of, 26, I don't think I really understood it. And I was like, okay, lady, I don't know, but whatever. But she stayed with me. It's really special when those people come into your life. Dinesh, do you have an angel like that?
That's a good question. I'm not sure, but at the risk of ensuring that we don't leave the listeners with significant amount of anxiety, because no one's ever said to me that I'm special and the world needs me. And I don't want to live the rest of my days waiting for that to happen, wondering if today's going to be the day.
You're special. The world needs you.
I was going to say, let's just tell all the listeners that you're special. The world needs you. And we'll just get it out of the way. It's kind of like a Tony Robbins seminar. People go and they're like, you had a breakthrough. Where's my breakthrough? When is my breakthrough going to come? And if you're looking for it, it's not going to come. But here, we're going to tell everyone.
And I will say the caveat to that is the world needs you to show up as your best version of yourself.
Yeah.
That's what the world needs.
It's like when you go to the beach and you grab sand, the harder you squeeze, like, you think the more you're going to squeeze, like, the more it's going to come out. It's actually the opposite. And sometimes you just you hold that sand and it'll naturally seep out. And like, life is like that, right? The harder, the bad you want, the more bad you want something, chances are it's not going to come to fruition until the universe is ready for it to come to fruition.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the other thing, I'm seeing Dinesh like standing, right? Like, kudos to you, man, for standing up for doing this podcast, because I think I can't do that. But one of the coolest analogies I got was when you're standing up, right? You have your left foot in the past, right? Yeah. Your right foot is in the future. And what's directly in between that is the present. So don't piss on the present, right? And I think that was a really cool analogy that I've heard, where I was like, you can look at the past and let that guide you, but don't dwell on it. The future, we have no idea what's coming. So don't get anxiety. All you can control is the present moment. And like, to what you were saying, Seema, like, you choose how you show up in that present moment, because that's all that matters. Sorry, those are two things just when both of you guys said what you had said, just came to mind.
Great visuals.
Absolutely. And one thing I'll add before we move on is we tend to catastrophize the future. If you think about it, right? Like, you get in your car, you put the seatbelt on in case that you got into an accident, right? You buy life insurance because in case something happens. And I think those are very practical things. I'm not talking about not doing those things, but our general predisposition is to think about the most negative outcome of a potentiality that's going to happen in the future, right? What's going to happen if I do this? And we think about the worst case scenario. I start a business and it goes bankrupt. My kids will be hungry, will be on the street. And most often than not, I don't know the stats, but I've read it multiple times and I've started to believe this. Most often than not, the worst case scenario rarely comes through, right? Rarely comes through. But we spend a disproportionate, inordinate amount of time fixated on that worst case scenario. And, if we can develop the ability to say, hey, I'm going to understand that the chance of this worst case reality coming true is relatively small, and let me not ruin my experience of moving towards the future and what could come out of it. I think we can move a little bit more gracefully and freely, as opposed to sort of moving with such rigidity that we almost predetermine that worst case outcome. So you're a dentist. I've seen that you do much more than cavities. I think you release tongue ties. You're a surgeon. Tell us exactly what you do and take us through how Be Your Own Superhero came into existence, how you got enough muscles to justify wearing a super tight Superman shirt. Because I would put that on and be like, what am I doing wearing this super tight Superman shirt with my big beer belly? I don't deserve to wear that. But you pull it off, you rock it, and I love it. So tell us how we got all the way there.
I appreciate that. Well, yeah, I'm a pediatric dentist. It comes just like any dentist. There are the basic, you can call it the cookie cutter dentistry, or quinoa and kale dentistry. Now that we're in a very health conscious world, so you can pick your poison. So from your regular fillings, taking care of cavities, that's part of it. But one of the things that I really enjoy and I've kind of specialized is helping infants at a young age with airway management. So part of the dentistry of like sleep and airway. It's kind of a big thing. A lot of kids can be tongue tied, can be lip tied. It affects the breastfeeding journey, goes into a lot of mom guilt and mom shame. There's a lot of postpartum depression out there. Honey had it. Seema, I know you and I spoke about it a couple years ago.
Yeah.
We had it, and it's real. It's one of the things I try to really bring to the forefront with a lot of the guys out there. I was like, your wife is going through things that you will never experience with latching on and feeding. So I want that journey to be as smooth as possible. And there are things that are out of the mom's control because it's anatomical, structures in the child's mouth that need to be evaluated and addressed where appropriately. Now, tongue ties become a huge fad. And so there is a criteria that I have, and I make sure that each case is warranted and not just go laser happy, so to speak. But if it meets the indication criteria, then I would say it's probably the most life-changing thing that I do. Outside of that, I do a lot of sedation dentistry. It's something I've been very lucky and blessed to have trained in residency for, with some amazing mentors, and I couldn't be here without them and the program that I went to. A lot of kids, when they go to the dentist, they'll sit in the chair, and if they need a little bit of a coping mechanism, some dentists will put laughing gas, nitrous oxide, just to help relieve the tension and help them with those feelings. But that's always not enough. And so if you're not trained appropriately, the next step a lot of folks will take is go take the kid right to the hospital or sedate them completely under general anesthesia, which has absolutely its perks, and you can do a lot of good quality work without a moving target, so to speak. But there are a lot of kids who don't need that, and that extreme is too much. The laughing gas is not enough. And so there's this happy medium called oral conscious sedation, which you use pharmacological management and intervention to help the child, attain a state of like relaxation, where you're able to perform the dental work. They're not fully under anesthesia. They're on the spectrum of mild to moderate sedation, but allows you to get a lot of great work done in a safe and comfortable environment. And that's something that I have been lucky and privileged to really master. It's kind of what I teach right now with the residents at the University of Pennsylvania Dental School. I run their sedation program for them. And so that's kind of been really neat, because that opens an area of dentistry that sometimes some people view as gray, or some programs just don't get enough exposure to. And so it's something a lot of folks are not comfortable doing. And I'm just lucky enough where I have had the exposure, and it's an area where I love it. And I'm glad that I'm able to teach others how to get comfortable and be in their comfort zone while doing it.
Yeah.
I will say, I remember going through training, and I love that what conscious sedation has allowed for people. Because I see it, in dentistry. I also see the medical pediatric side of it with what Manish does. And what it really does allow is to honor the child for their experience, to not make them wrong for feeling scared or being young. Like, there's a lot of people out there who have dental trauma. They're scared of the dentist because they used to use things called papoose boards. Do you remember those? Where they literally would
Oh
like
yeah.
at you in. And
There's still
I
places that
thought
use
that
that.
was normal. Yeah, like I thought it was, never gave it a second thought when we were in training. I never used one myself. But now I think about it and I'm hearing you kind of talk about conscious sedation and the benefits that it can offer in the right indications. And I'm like, wow, yeah, I couldn't imagine how scary it must be to be really small. You're already at the mercy of your parents and the dental provider, right? Like in that sense. And then to be strapped down and freaking out is not healthy for anybody and
Oh,
not safe for the provider, right? We're working with a lot of sharp instruments in a small space, but just honoring the emotional, physical, mental trauma that can happen unless it's done correctly, done with love, done with compassion. So I'm so glad that you're out there and you're offering this. But I still maintain you're not the quinoa and kale. I've never heard that. You're not the quinoa and kale pediatric dentist, in that you've always done things differently. Like, it's almost like you're that guy that looks for how the stream is flowing, and then you go the opposite way on purpose. Like toothpaste, dyes, what water you drink, like all of it. So why? Like, why not just swim with the rest of us?
yeah, that's good. I had this epiphany once. I was like, I was listening to podcasts. And I was like, I realized we're all domesticated from the time we're born. We're asked to like live in a society. We're asked to abide by rules, and to some degree, yes, you absolutely have to. You can't go around doing certain things and getting away with it. But if you think about it, like, we're all domesticated. Even people who are listening to this podcast, you're domesticated by whatever I'm presenting to you in terms of knowledge or whatever they're listening from, and like taking taking this as at face value. And I always tell people, I take no offense if someone takes what I say and they go and challenge it on like Google or another platform, because that's what life's about. And for me, that's what dental school is all about. Dental school is great, gives you a great education. But here's a problem I realized was that every time we had a lunch and learn, which is like, during your lunch break, you get pampered with food, which is amazing when you're a dental student. You don't have to pay for lunch. But it was always Colgate and Crest. It
Yeah.
was always Colgate and Crest. And because they monopolized the market. And then, everything that you're told, a lot of these dental schools, if you think about it, are in an urban environment.
Mm-hmm.
Like Philly, like you got Penn and Temple, you've got hospitals like Cincinnati Children's Hospital in the heart of like downtown Cincinnati. So what you're seeing is you end up working with a very indigent patient population that can't go out and afford a toothpaste or ingredients or other dentrifices for your oral health that are expensive. And I think these companies like Crest and Colgate understand that, and they capitalize on that very well. Then I just, after residency, which I loved residency, you couldn't pay me $1 to go back to dental. You couldn't pay me $1 million to go back to dental school again. But I would do residency for free in a heartbeat because I loved it that much.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, my residency, like I really, really, I was, I think, so blessed to have some amazing mentors, as I alluded to. But I would do that in a heartbeat. I learned so much there. But I also was taught, hey, Deep, like, go challenge things, right? Like, go figure things out. Like, and that's where I think I got this like kind of this hustler mentality of, hey, like, no, I'm going to look into this. Like, yeah, I know we do it this way at the hospital, but like, how do we challenge this? One of the things I had a patient who had a red dye allergy, and one of the medications that we give in dentistry for anxiolytic effects and to calm a child down is called midazolam. A lot of adults know this as like the child's version of Valium. So a lot of adults will take a Valium for anxiety, and this is a child's version of it where the half-life is not as long. But this midazolam comes in a bottle that's like thick, viscous red syrup. And if you have a red dye allergy, you can't take it because there's like red 33 or red 40 in that bottle, which I'm so glad, like, we're going to start banning all this stuff coming out soon, which I'm super excited for. But that's when I realized I've got to find another way to give this child that medication. And so I gave the IV form, which you'd usually, give through the vein, but you can take that orally. And we gave that orally, and it worked just as well. It was so much better because the volume is significantly less. Patient compliance skyrockets. And there was no, there's no side effect. A lot of times with the red syrup, it gives you the opposite effect called a paradoxical reaction, which instead of calming the kid, it gets them super hyper. Sometimes you might notice this with Benadryl in kids. Instead of calming them, it'll get them riled up. And so the red dye has done that on many occasions. And that's when I realized is there's got to be another way. And when I talked to my pharmacology professor at Penn, we talked about this, and he was like, "You could certainly give the oral." And he's like, "No one does it because it's more expensive." And I was like, "Okay, now cost is a factor." I was like, "Let's get cost out of here. Let's start really doing things." I was like, "Why are we in the healthcare field if everything's about money? Let's really make things that are efficient, efficacious, and safe." And especially with kids, airway's different. There's whole other factors I'm taking into consideration. I was like, I want these kids to be super safe. And that's why I just started challenging certain things that I thought were the holy grail, fluoride being another one. And I really looked into this. I was like, hey, it's not a one track approach. We've really got to figure out, we've got to individualize medicine. We've got to individualize healthcare. Um, and that's really kind of what got me on this journey, to being a lot more conscious and mindful with ingredients. Not only in terms of administering them, but also what I put into my body, what I talk about with other parents in terms of, over-the-counter medications, what to look for there. So it just became a whole slew of things kind of came into one. And the beauty of it was I was going out of my lane and I was told, dude, you got to stay in your lane.
Right.
And F that. Anyone listening to that message, get out of your lane. That's where growth happens. You don't want to be this subservient servant of life where you stay in your lane and you're like, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. And you live your life very contained into your comfort zone. Get out of your comfort zone. And yeah, you'll fail, but that's okay. You'll grow. And I'd rather take falling on my face and growing from that than not growing at all.
Yeah. Really powerful. Really, really powerful. I want to push in a little bit on that. I think everything that you said is something that I believe in, and things that I also reiterate and say to people. But the reality is, what you're presenting is an identity. It's a level of bravery and courage that, while everyone hears it and it sounds nice, get out of your lane, don't be comfortable, question things. The people that know this also, with the other hand, have such a strong identity that prevents them from doing it, right? So what does that look like in real life? For example, you're questioning how to administer medication in your profession, but they're adults, functioning adults, incredibly brilliant adults, smart people who get a job. And when you do orientation, you got to fill out your forms. And we get to the 401 election. And it's like, well, I don't know numbers. I don't know investments. I don't have to figure this out. Let me phone a friend. Let me call someone to help me with my money, right? Or another one I see a lot is taxes, right? I don't understand taxes. How do you, what have you found a way to help people who are so solidified in their identity, or whether it's working out or anything? I don't understand how to do this. So I'm going to defer that power to someone outside. And even the healthcare industry, I stopped going to a traditional doctor that utilizes insurance. I go to a concierge physician completely, exclusively, right? Because I started questioning things and needed to take my health into my own hands because of my migraines and things like that. Have you found a way to actually move people and have them show up with a different identity when they actually know this information already, but still are falling back and slipping into this deference of, well, religion says this, the law says this, my physician says this? What do you have to say to that?
No, I tell them listen, at the end of the day, we're all governed and we all want to do things, the way we deem best. And I'm not here to tell you what's right and what's wrong. I can just tell you what's worked for me. I can tell you that going against the grain at times, I don't do it all the time because, there are certain things I'm like, hey, the literature supports this and X, Y, and Z. There's got to be different ways. Right now, in today's day and age, it's a lot easier because we can see that Red 3 was just banned. Yeah. So for all those people that I was like, you trust yourself in the government for the past 30, 40 years. I'm not trying to be political, but what I'm trying to say is that things change. The needle changes. Nothing is ever constant. So while what you're thinking right now is true and it's part of your identity, totally fine. I don't disrespect it. I actually respect it. Just be open to knowing that things may change down the road. You get this debate on coffee, red wine, right? People say,
Mhm.
oh, red wine is like awesome with the resveratrol. Some people say, well, yeah, you want resveratrol, you've got to drink 500 glasses of red wine to achieve that effect. Um, it's a ping pong ball that's going back and forth. And
Yeah.
I tell people, just make sure you have a paddle.
Yeah.
Make sure you can control the spin on that. Make sure you can control and hit that back. You don't want to be the ball. You want to be the paddle. And
Yeah.
that way you can hit that ball back over, but then you can also you can make decisions and you can change the trajectory of that ball when it's appropriate for you later down the road. Just have an open mind. And that would be that's my message to people, because
Mhm.
I don't want to, like I said, it's the analogy of when you take someone to like the stream, take the horse to the stream. You can't force feed it water. I
Yeah.
Mhm.
can guide you to the stream, but whenever you're ready to drink the water, you'll drink it. It could be in
Mhm.
a year, it could be in a decade. But whenever you do choose to drink it, hopefully it's because you've made that conscious decision or it serves your needs at the time. And that's solely up to you.
Mhm.
I really love that analogy of the paddle and the ball. But what actually came to mind for me is coffee. Like right now, I'm in this whole I enjoy my coffee, but I don't want the caffeine.
Mhm.
So then we were talking about this before we hit record and before the Nesh hopped on. It is just like we're so used to doing things the way that we do them. I wake up, I have my coffee, and just be willing to recognize that you determine the cadence, you determine the choice, and what you choose last week doesn't have to be the same choice that you make next week. I still am trying to figure it out with the coffee business because I don't want the caffeine. It makes me dehydrated. It affects my day. But then we found out like, hey, what's the process like to decaffeinate coffee? Because that's not natural,
Yeah.
right? It doesn't
Right.
come decaffeinated. And so then you look and you're like, oh, wow, there's a natural way, but then there's a really not natural way that they decaffeinate coffee. And it's just about,
Right.
it's not that the coffee is bad or that caffeine is bad. It's just making sure if you choose decaf, you know what to choose,
Mhm.
or you choose to not drink the coffee at all, but not labeling yourself as a coffee drinker or a non-coffee drinker, only a tea drinker. I know that can be a little bit tangential, but that's really kind of what came to mind for me when you said, make a choice, do something that serves you for the time. And then if it doesn't, you learn something different. Don't spend time beating yourself up about how come you didn't know, the government should be held responsible,
Right.
blah, blah, blah. Like just do what you can and move on.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. No, there's a lot of blame game going around. Like, I think is when people start taking ownership of what they do. And like I said, I've done we're talking about this before too. Like when the pandemic hit, I went like vegan. And I
Mhm.
realized vegan wasn't great because like I was getting a lot of calories and I actually gained weight because
Right.
fried cheese, just because of vegan cheese,
Right.
it's not a healthier option.
Yeah.
And so that was like, I learned from that and I moved on. We became plant based. And then when I got plant based, I got really, I feel like to answer one of the second parts of your question, like, I think that's kind of how I slimmed down and got into like much better shape because I wasn't in the best shape. And being a dad, I wanted to redefine what a dad bod means.
Yeah.
Having a dad bod. I grew up like not the best health, like very overweight. That was a personal goal for me, is to redefine like a dad bod. But in that journey, like I have made mistakes and I realized I need to get protein in me. So
Right.
what did I do? I went back to whey protein. But now I just source my whey. I was telling Seema, I get my whey protein from Ireland, and our cheese we get from Amsterdam. And that's because obviously like the things are a lot more cleaner ingredient wise in Europe.
Yeah.
But I've had to it's trials and tribulations, like what works, what doesn't work, and then you're constantly modifying that. So I have fallen flat on my face many times and not seen the progress I've wanted to. And
Yeah.
finally, after doing and making some modifications, many modifications, have found a happy spot. And so one thing
Yeah.
I tell people is like everything in life is a bell-shaped curve.
Right.
You see that like it's a horseshoe curve. Most people fall like statistically a standard deviation in the middle of that, which means that I don't know, like if we drink alcohol, let's say 95% of us will feel the same effects of alcohol, but there are outliers on both sides. That
Mhm.
can be with caffeine. Like some people are hyper vigilant, and like super affected by caffeine. Some people can pound caffeine right before bed and go and have a great night's rest.
Yeah.
In terms of fall asleep, now quality of sleep probably is not the best, but I can fall asleep right away. I tell people, know where you are in terms of on that curve.
Mhm.
And everyone will be a little bit different, and that's okay. But that's the best way to get to know yourself, your limits, your tolerance to certain things, and eventually maximizing your best life.
Help me understand something. We talked about the toothpaste, right? And I have to credit you for moving me to Rise toothpaste. And even though it um, is not as refreshing in my mouth, I understand why the other ones are refreshing in my mouth. But I feel that at some point my brain short circuits a little bit. And that on the one hand, if I start to believe that everything is consumerism and I have to spend my time on trial and error to figure out what works for me and what doesn't work, because there's alcohol, there's cigarettes, there's toothpaste. Um, that's a really dark place to approach life from, to think that everyone's out to sell me something and it's not in my best interest, despite them telling me it's in my best interest. And I think a lot of people felt this way during the COVID pandemic, about vaccines, about masks, about, should you eat meat? Should you be vegan? Microplastics? Should I drink from stainless steel? And you also mentioned that things change, right? We went through, when we were growing up, low fat. That was the thing. As long as it was low fat, you were good. And now it's low sugar. And then as long as it didn't have sugar, you could have artificial sweeteners. And now artificial sweeteners are coming out to be bad, right? Like, it feels like this moving target, and we're constantly confused, and at the root of it is somebody's making a dollar out of pushing or peddling something. I was talking to someone about this. We live on a very small speck in a very large galaxy, which is part of a lot of galaxies. And when I look down at the ants at my foot, I can't tell which one has clean teeth, which one has a outsized leg, or which one is a little lighter or a little darker. Like, they're all ants to me. And I have to think that at some level, someone looking at us or from the outside being like, you have cavities, you don't, it doesn't really matter, right? And then you look at our parents who did use some of these things. We're talking about wine, we're talking about Black Label, we're talking about commercial toothpaste, things like that. They make it to their 80s and 90s, and their teeth are fine to the extent that they need to be. And is it really worth it to go down the rabbit hole of questioning the toothpaste I use or what I drink out of? And is that where I should be putting my bandwidth, as opposed to just living life fully? Because at the end of the day, ain't gonna matter.
It's really funny. You said that because that was something I was thinking about the other day. Is if you take a calendar and you have January all the way to December, and you draw a little pencil dot on December, anywhere on December, on the square on December, that's how long humans have been around in the
Yeah.
existence of the universe. Not us, like individually, the human species. So we're a micro fraction of that. So to answer your question, the long scheme, yeah, nothing really matters, right? In a century from now, we'll be long gone. We might be remembered for a generation or two, and then after that, it's life, right? Not to sound morbid, but
Yeah.
that's life, right? But how you show up and how you want to live your life is something I believe matters, right? You can sit there and be like, oh, well, I'm going to die one day, so it doesn't matter. But what if you said, how do I live though, right? Yeah, we'll die. But how do I choose to live? How do I choose to leave a legacy? Even though your legacy might be evolved into, like disintegrate one day. It's this analogy, I'm sure you guys seen the trauma analogy, where there's a Coke and there's water, and you pour the Coke into the next generation. The Coke gets lighter and lighter and lighter. With trauma, you'll never ever. I mean, and there's people show, oh, it gets like super light. That'll never happen, because somewhere along the way, someone's hit the reset button in the trauma, because everyone brings their own traumas. But all I say is, like, to answer your question, which I think is a loaded question. Our parents grew up, because like our parents, I think, grew up in a very, like, a lot of them maybe came or were immigrants. And so when they grew up in India, or they grew up in the Middle East, or, grew up outside the United States, the culture, the food, the walking, right? Everything was different. I think they were in many ways living a very wholesome life. Even being able to walk to relatives' house and not showing up, and the formalities were different, right? So there's a lot more sense of this camaraderie and family, which, if you look at the blue zones, people who drink wine there live longer, right? And so we commend, like, the blue zone, and we give alcohol a good connotation in those areas, but outside of it, it's kind of has a negative connotation. So I think there's a lot of factors that kind of go into this. We fast forward now, right? Since the 1960s, 1970s, just where we are now. Look at our cereals, all the ingredients, like, in terms of dyes and coloring. ADHD, where was ADHD, like, 3-4 decades ago? And so
Yeah.
a lot of this, I feel like, is also kind of what we're living with. And in many ways, it's kind of, we can consider ourselves our struggles are going to be, some of our struggles are the hardest struggles for our generation, even compared to our parents, in certain aspects of what we're dealing with, tying cultures together, making these healthy habit and food choices, and dealing with this stuff. There is no right or wrong, but all I can say is, you control what you can control. You can get the best toothpaste out there, but if you don't eat a good diet, you might as well just take that tub of toothpaste and just put it down the drain. And to what you're saying makes a lot of sense, Dinesh, because there's a lot of factors. There's a lot of compounding factors that go into this. You could eat a really great diet and then not really worry about your toothpaste. You might be okay because your DNA and the immunoglobulins in your saliva protect you from the person to your right. So a lot of that stuff is tough, right? A lot of that stuff is tough. So I can tell people is just try to live your best life, make the choices that you feel are the healthiest for you, so that way you can show up and you can live. You feel like you're living and optimizing at your full potential. And anyone will tell you if they like, had 3 tequila shots every night for a week, they're going to be not as productive the next day, right? Or they get drunk every night, like your productivity goes down. So you know your body best, and whatever you can do that you feel you can show up for those around you and show up like at 100% with your love cup filled, with you being able to pour your cup into other people's love cup and filling their love cup up. However you feel you can best do that, do that. And that's for you to determine.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fantastic answer, and it's where I am too. I think it's a difference between how you approach your life, and it's whether you're in the driver's seat or whether you're in the passenger seat of the car, and you're outsourcing the responsibility for each mile of your life to something or someone else, right? And you talk about the blue zones and things like that. And I recently read a study that disproved the blue zones, that they even exist, largely because the data on aging and how long life expectancy is manipulated and are not kept really well. So blue zones are traditionally areas where people have the most centenarians, right? They live over 100. But now they're saying, well, it's no different because the record keeping of the people living over 100 was faulty. And if you listen to something like that and be like, oh man, like they told me this was a blue zone, you're outsourcing a lot of the responsibility of your life to something or someone else outside of you. And we have to remember that a lot of the information that's out there, they're broad strokes. They're patterns, they're trends, but they're not specific to you. And we are biased to internalizing something and saying, hey, it shows up very often, like someone loses weight. Hey, what did you do? I want to do that. And then when it doesn't work for you, we internalize that's something wrong with me. But really, I think what I've taken away is that we are more unique and incredibly different than one another than we are on lots of different areas. And we can either live life just parroting what we see other people's do and not get the results we want, or we put in the time to be the driver.
Yeah.
No, it's so true. It's so true. And I think, like you said, with the blue zones, right? Like a lot of people look at alcohol. When you think of blue zone, people are like, oh, well, if I go there, I can drink, right? But it's like, no, like you also have to walk 5 miles. If you've gone to some of these cities in Italy, these old ladies are walking. I'm not talking walking. I'm talking walking up like cliff sides and coming down and eating whole grain meals. And I mean, it's a true lifestyle change, not just I can consume alcohol and socialize and I'll be happy, right? And I think it's like that's what a lot of people take out of it. And there's a bigger and a much deeper picture to all of this in terms of like, living a complete lifestyle.
I'm thinking of two people right now. I'm thinking of my own grandmother who's about to be 100. And I'm also thinking, I have a friend, shout out to Karen. She listens to the podcast. Her dad lives in San Francisco. Nick Uncle is also up there in his 90s and he walks everywhere. I think he gets like 20,000 steps a day. And
that's awesome.
Yeah. And he's just like living life. And when I look at my grandmother and I look at Nick Uncle, it really is this place of empowerment that they're living from, right? They're not sitting here going like, oh, we're old. This is what happens. Like, does it take him all day to get from point A to point B? I don't know. I haven't seen him do it, but it probably takes him longer than it did at 25. But he's still showing up for himself, right? Regardless of whether you're losing weight or deciding to drink alcohol or not drink alcohol, eat the meat, don't eat the meat, whatever it is, do it out of love for yourself, not because you're looking to avoid an outcome, but rather because you're trying to create an outcome that really you feel will serve you best in the moment. Losing weight, like it's such a metric. Like if I look at a friend that lost 20 pounds, yeah, maybe she lost 20 pounds or he lost 20 pounds, but that doesn't mean that they did it in a way that was healthy for them.
Yeah.
I don't know the story. All I see is somebody who lost 20 pounds and I'm making it mean something and then relating it back to me and saying, oh, I should or shouldn't do what they did. Right. So just being aware of kind of where you are in the whole scheme of things is really empowering.
It is. You know, it reminds me, it's like, it's not about the pursuit of happiness. It's about the happiness of pursuit. And if you see people who are like really thriving, that's what they're doing. That's a lot of these people live by that. They're not out there chasing happiness. The bar changes, right? I mean, like,
Mm.
what's happy? Their happiness is just pursuing life each and every day.
Exactly.
Um, and that's a cool thing. So I love coming across like elders like that because they're not just full of wisdom. They've got this swag
Yeah.
that you're like, yeah, I want that when I'm older, right? I want that. I want flexibility. I don't need to grow up to be like some Hulk macho man or some like really fit person. I want flexibility. I want to be able to do the mundane things that I
Yeah.
think are boring now that people who are as old as me then are would die for to have,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the cool part about that. So those people are, yeah, that's awesome that you have folks like that around your life. Paternal grandmother lived till she was 108.
Wow.
Yeah, my maternal grandmother is 96 right now. She's with my parents and she's alive and doing well. But if you look at their habits, they're very simple lifestyle, if you think about it. Very simple.
Well, speaking of, we've kind of circled around this and danced around it, but I wanted to go back to this concept of labels, right? Really, we're assigning labels to what we can do, what we can't do, what those labels mean, what that should look like, what that shouldn't look like. But you and Dhwani, your wife, have really taken that and made it something really special. And I want our listeners to know about it.
The one thing my wife and I have always wanted to do, I'm obviously in the dental field and she's, pharmacy, but we've always wanted to have a business together that is not profession related. And
Mhm.
so we've got two boys who are currently 7 and 5. And we just realized in a world with like stereotypes, and just to give some context on this, like our 7-year-old, it doesn't look like a 7-year-old, right? He's just like, he's a smaller kid, South Asian, like smaller kid, just barely 50 pounds right now, but just full of life and love and energy, but gets labeled, right? He gets told, oh, like, how old are you? Oh, you're 7? Like,
Mhm.
okay, like, and by family members. And our youngest, Rion, and he's blessed with these beautiful hazel eyes, and he'd get compared when they're growing up, and we saw it all the time as parents, like, oh, his eyes are gorgeous, and then
Mhm.
poor Aryan is just sitting there like, well, what about me, and he's not saying it, but you can just read his emotion.
Yeah.
And it hurts the most when it comes from family members because you
Mhm.
think they would know better. But you realize there's no malice and no malicious intent behind what they're saying. It's just observations. But
Mhm.
then it came down to, man, Dwight and I were like, we've got our homework cut out for us. Like, we've got to have these positive affirmations every night. We've got to make sure our kids know their value, that they mean so much to us. They mean so much to people around them. And just because someone says something doesn't really define who they are. And it was to the point where it was so bad when Rion would get complimented about his eyes, when Aryan and Rion would have a fight, guess where Aryan would go for? He'd poke at the eyes. That's where he would
Mm.
go for, right?
Whoa.
And
Mhm.
so you start having this, like, you learn about psychology, all this stuff, and you're like, wow, like, kids, like, they'll go for the trigger, right? They'll go for the jugular, and like that was a jugular for him. But Aryan has these like two amazing dimples when he smiles, and he lights up the room. Um, but it's what people value. And so we're like, it doesn't matter what people value. What do you value? And so through this, and as being like a being in the dental field, I see a lot of kids who have special needs, autism on the spectrum, Down syndrome. Dwight and I were like, like, we've got to do this for our kids because Aryan's also a little bit highly sensitive, and I was highly sensitive growing up. And what that kind of means is, like, sometimes loud noises can trigger you. Having tags on the back of your shirt
Mhm.
can trigger you. Aryan, when he puts his coat on, he has to like roll his fingers up like this and
Mm.
put the coat on because if this gets raveled up, God forbid, it's
Yeah.
it's very difficult for him. It causes issues, and so we realized he's not alone. There's a lot of kids out there who are highly sensitive and they get labeled. And let's fight this. And so we came up with some designs on T-shirts. There one's like a Superman shirt that says every spectrum is super. And it's just to help empower kids. And I think our whole message with labels is breaking stereotypes. It's stopthelabels.com. We've got a lot of different shirts out there, but one's like grow at your own rhythm, and that was inspired by our 7-year-old, and he's a beacon of like life and love and happiness. The only downside is he's a little shorter for his age, and he'll hit his growth spurt whenever he's meant to hit his growth spurt.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But that doesn't diminish who he is as a person, doesn't diminish any other kid out there who's as a person. Body shaped, everyone's a different shape. Dude, you're growing at your own rhythm and pace, and that's how it should be. And so it's just to bring awareness to these situations and to these stereotypes. And our whole goal is, hey, as parents, we owe it to our kids.
Mhm.
As adults, we owe it to the younger generations to let them know that, hey, it starts with us, and we are in tune. We have the cognitive ability to understand this. We're mature about this, and we realize that, we can make the biggest impact for years to come. And that's kind of how labels got created.
I love that. My son is typical South Asian kid too, and we get a lot of that. We get a lot of, I'm small for my age. Where do I fit in terms of basketball team? And he loves football. Like what? There's all these things, and we do tell him like, you'll hit your growth spurt when you hit it, and it doesn't define who you are. But I think what you did differently, and is so just, it brings a smile to my face and my heart. The important part here that can get missed is you have to see them and honor that emotion of like, I feel this way. This is real to me. And in an attempt to honor, like, yeah, that's not a problem. You'll grow into it, or you'll overcome it, or whatever. You're special in your own way. I think the opportunity also lies to really just, that may be true, and also they are feeling less than. And until we see that and honor that, they won't be able to release it, right? It will still have its power on them, because the narrative then is like, yeah, but even my mom and dad aren't seeing that this is a problem for me. This matters to me.
Yeah.
And I think we do that all the time. Like the labels I have a kid that's like that too. The seam of the sock, or like, there's certain shoes that cause issues. And sometimes you're just like, dude, we got to go. Like, just put your shoes on. This is not an issue. Like, there's kids without shoes in the world, but this approach I just really love. And I cannot be more proud of not only you recognizing the issue, but then doing something beyond. Like, nobody's making you do this. Nobody said you need to go out and take time out of your already full lives to do, but this is incredible.
Thank you. Yeah, the one thing with Arian we realized was, like, real quick, like, he birthday parties, right? Like, two things that come to mind. A lot of parents are waiting for the day that their child can sleep by themselves, right? It's like this like thing of privilege that you're like, I can't wait till my child sleeps alone. And guess what? Like, they'll still wake up in the middle of the night and they come to our bed. And you as a parent, embrace it, because there will be a day, and you don't know when that day is going to come. It's going to hit you where, like, he slept through the night. He did it again and again. And now you're missing that the feeling that was once annoying you, you're longing for. With Arian and birthday parties, he always wanted, he didn't like at first grade, they start drop-offs last year when he was in first grade, and he didn't want us to drop him off. And parents were like, oh, like, why are you sticking around? Like, you can drop him off and go. Like, we'd be the only parents at some of these parties sometimes. And I realized he'd play and he'd look back. He'd just make sure that we were there, right? And it's a sign of comfort. And I tell parents, don't let that annoy you. That is a secure attachment that your child has, because they're relying on you as their provider, as their means of safety. And you'd rather have that person be you than another colleague of theirs who is also, their frontal cortex is developing. They're trying to figure the world out for themselves. So stick around. Be that parent that stays there. If your child needs you there, stay with them. It's not a burden. You are helping them grow, because eventually they're going to not need you for their growth anymore. And now he's in second grade, and guess what? He's able to go to drop-off parties. And he'll ask, hey, I'm okay. You guys can drop me off and I'll come back. And there are times he's like, stay with me. But you can see the progression, and just enjoy the progression. All the parents out there, just enjoy it.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. That hits home for me. As a parent of slightly older children, it goes faster than you think.
Yeah. And, when I texted you this morning to say, looking forward to our conversation, the text before that was from June 2023, so we're 18 months out. And this is what Deep had said to me. It's a longer text, but I'll read one sentence. Kids are our life as parents. And so if you're sort of rushing past part of that, you're also rushing past part of your life. But the t-shirts, I'm looking at them. ADHD, superpowers in disguise, active, driven, happy, daring. They're incredibly empowering. The colors are great. Congratulations. This is such a amazing endeavor, and we're so proud to be part of it, that you're sharing it with us. Congratulations, and we couldn't be more thrilled to support this. And the website is stopthelabels.com. Everyone, even if you're not interested in buying the t-shirt, just go check it out. Not for the t-shirts, not for the message, but just check it out and think about here's Deep. He's got 2 kids. His wife's a pharmacist. He's a dentist, and he's got an online clothing business. What else could we do if we just had a strong enough purpose behind us to motivate us to do something? And it's not something he's doing out of the goodness of his heart completely. He's actually making money, and that money is going to go to some betterment of his life or the lives of other people, and he's changing the world. So I'm so glad that you're able to find a venture that marries so much of who you are.
Thanks a lot. That means a lot. I appreciate that.
Good stuff. We're so glad to have you here. This is an episode that's been in the making for so long. You've listened to the show before. Seema and I are going to go back and forth through a series of questions, and I'll start. What's one thing that we can do today after listening to this episode where I'm sure anyone that's listening to this episode is super amped, really excited about where they can show up and be empowered in their life? And what's one thing you can leave them with today that you know beyond a doubt that if they did it, their life would be better by tomorrow morning?
I think of PPI, which is kind of been the thing that I always believe in: passion, purpose, and intent. And wake up every day with passion, purpose, and intent. What I mean by that is when you wake up, put the phone away. Should not be the first thing you see. Wake up, write down. I think journaling is a great way. If you journal already, I think a lot of people have seen the benefits of that. Or if you don't want to journal, just write down. Have a little notebook in front of you, and write down 3 things that you're grateful for, and then 3 things that you want to accomplish by the end of the day. And instead of saying in your mind, I say write it down, because when you write something down, it's an intentional act of something that you're doing. And so you're kind of staying true to who you are, and you're kind of holding yourself accountable because you're writing something down that you can visualize throughout the day, and it holds you accountable in your own right. But that's, I would say, there's so much in this world to be grateful for. So I always start with gratitude. And gratitude is one of the biggest dopamine hits that your brain can have by just thinking about how lucky you are and how grateful you are. And then stay driven, stay hungry. And if you write down 3 goals, it doesn't have to be big. It could just say avoid caffeine today. Let's just say, right? Like you're working on that, right? And just saying, hey, today I'll avoid it and see how I can do it. Or, pick up, run to the grocery store and buy veggies. It doesn't have to be elaborate. It's just to be something that that you can hold yourself accountable for that day. And I think that's one of the biggest ways to impact and make change in your life.
I love it. I thought you were going to tell us to floss, but I love the PPI instead.
Yeah.
Yes. So I get to ask the Ask It Forward portion of this podcast. Listeners, if you're new, what this means is that the guest before Deep has left a question for him, not knowing who he is, what we're going to talk about, even when we were going to record. They just left a question. We get to have him answer it, and then Deep, you get to do the same, leave it for the next guest. This question is from Nisha Patel, who is a sobriety coach. And her question to you is, what is the purpose you're trying to fulfill with the work you're doing? Now, I love this question because you just talked about purpose. So very serendipitous.
And I have to go back to my slogan with this is be your own superhero. I'm trying to empower every child to be their own superhero. I think as a pediatric dentist, opening the new office, it's a superhero themed office, which I can't wait to share more details with you guys about that. But with a clothing company, I think everything for me, revolves around youth. It's kind of when, we look at and reminisce where we were. A lot of our trauma comes from when we were little, and, how we're able to manage that and deal with that. So I think the youth plays, the fountain of youth that they say, it holds a very special place in my heart for many, many reasons. And also that's kind of when I went through cancer with methotrexate, no chemotherapy, no radiation. But when I really think of kids who have gone through chemotherapy as children and going through cancer and go through adverse effects as kids, whether it's losing a parent, whether it's, something very life-changing, it shapes our identity in terms of who we are in this very moment. And so for me, I want to help these kids. I want to help anyone that I meet in life, help them become their own superhero. And especially when it comes to kids, helping them empowering them to be their own superhero. Because you don't need to wear the shirt to be a superhero. You don't have to wear a cape. I said it all along. I used to travel a lot for work, and I loved what I did. But I'll be the first one to tell you, my wife was the one who was the superhero, taking care of the kids at home and doing that. And I don't think I've realized to give her as much kudos in the past. But I can proudly say I am so blessed, because she wore that cape, and damn, man, she wore that cape really well.
Shout out to Dwani.
Shout out to Dwani. Yeah.
Of course. The thing that came to mind for me was so often people hear us talk, right? And they're like, that's great, find your purpose or live your purpose. And it can feel like they don't have one, or that they're trying to find it and they can't discover it. And I love that what you're saying is one of empowerment, right? It doesn't matter. Just empower yourself in any way, and that purpose will find you. That reason for showing up in that way will find you. Your clarity will find you, but just showing up in a way that allows you to be your biggest advocate, your biggest cheerleader, your biggest superhero is going to unlock far more than I think you can imagine. Curious what you would want to ask the next guest.
The one thing I would ask somebody, I love asking them this because, you know, when it's interview season, it's a question I ask a lot of the interviewees is, if you could wake up tomorrow with the ability to master any talent or any ability, what would you choose and why?
That's a good one.
What's your answer?
Yeah, when it comes to, like, you know, I asked this like a very different, like, if you had one superhero power that you could use, what would it be? And I think for me, I wish I could speak every language. I think that would allow me to really connect with a lot of people in this world and make traveling a lot more enjoyable. And I think some of the best stories I've had are traveling abroad and connecting with people in different countries. And so I wish if I had a talent or if I master any skill, it'd be you know, phonation, dictation of every language out there.
Yeah, Seema, you have one in mind?
I do, but there's so many. It's not
Come
like
on,
one.
tell us.
I agree with you, Deep. I've always loved language. I think it's very special. It makes it easy to connect when you're traveling. The other one I would say is I would love to be able to have really deep meditation, like really deep meditation. That's one thing. I would love to be able to be like, we were watching Hrithik Roshan dance in like one of these old movies that came out when we were in college. And I was like, man, if I could dance like that, right? Like just liquid and sing. Oh my gosh, that would be amazing too. All the things.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good one.
I think you can dance like that. We saw a little bit of a move there, and it was very fluid and liquid.
Fluid.
Yeah, it was. It was.
Well, my daughter, she's very, very.
Yeah.
I can. But that doesn't mean, you know, it's funny because I was bopping along the other day in the kitchen. I was re-listening to Loka Pandya's episode of on joy, right? He's all about joy and just freaking be happy, you know? And so I was bopping along in the kitchen and my kids were like, Mom, cringe, like you cannot dance. And I was like, you know what? I can dance. I can move my body. I'm enjoying the music. I don't care what I look like. Like, I'm just happy to be able to do it. But I did take a little bit of an ego hit, right? Like, I did get a little defensive, as much as I don't want to admit that. But I recognized it. We're so concerned about who's watching or doing it best. The people who light me up inside when I see them, they're not necessarily the best dancers. Maybe they are, and they're just having a blast doing it. Then great. But that old man in the store who's just like living his best life, singing, you know, that uncle that's like singing a Ruffy song while he picks out his apples. Like, dude, more power to you. Like, that's who I want to be. You're just freaking happy.
Yeah, I love it. Keep doing it every night. We do it when we cook dinner. We have the music on. We dance. It's like actually a thing that we do, and the kids get a hoot out of it, and they would watch us, and now they just jump in. And I think it's better when your kids get older because they'll look at you like, your mom's psycho, but they're like, I love that she's a psycho. Like she gives zero. She doesn't care. She's living her best life, and you're empowering them in a way without words, and that's kind of cool.
Absolutely. I think showing them and with words, also reaffirming them. When we drive to school, my son is in the back singing along, and two ways I try to encourage him is one, tell him he has a beautiful voice, and right away he tells me no. I was like, no, it really is beautiful. And then I also start singing along, and you know, it's like, well, okay, I'm not the only one, so this must be cool. So I think what you guys are doing are great. Good stuff. All right.
Yeah.
We can't thank you enough.
Sample? Sorry, I need to hear a sample of you singing.
Of who singing?
Yes.
Me?
You got the mic, man.
Farmer in the Dell. That's all we got. Farmer in the Dell. But anyways, we cannot thank you enough. Like the words thank you are not enough to say, express our gratitude for you coming on here or any of our other guests. And one of the things that we, Seema and I, have thought up as a way to thank our guests is give you the opportunity to share an organization or cause that's near and dear to your heart allows us to amplify that organization to our listeners. On behalf of you, as a way to say thank you, we'll make a donation to that organization. And it's a small way of having the impact of our conversation be greater than just on us, on you, or our listeners. And hopefully we can touch the lives in some small way of someone who doesn't even know the podcast exists.
Yeah, well, thank you guys both for having me. This was awesome. This is like love and genuinity and all the things I embody with three people are here. If I had a charity, I think given like kind of the cause and the mission with everything going on, I was thinking, with all the fires in LA, and I know there are a lot of people that stepped up for that. But if I could bring something up that's a little bit less well known, it'd be called it's Stomp the Bullying. I think kind of goes along the mission of labels in terms of what we've created. I think it also kind of goes along the lines of what I see in the dental field with pediatrics and kids who look different, who sound different, is the bullying. And I think that's one thing that if we can really eradicate, it would really, really help kids reach their potential in a very different way. So it's called Stomp the Bullying.
Got it. Yeah, we'll definitely make a contribution to Stop the Bullying, and
Appreciate
I'm so
you
glad
guys.
you share that with us because we'd never heard of it before, and
Yeah, I never have.
glad to
And
elevate it.
Sure.
I want our listeners to have all things Leap, access to things. You're opening this beautiful and very unique pediatric dental office in the King of Prussia area, Pennsylvania. You have labels. Tell the listeners where they can connect with you and anything you want to share with them that you're excited about.
Connecting wise, you can on Instagram, personal handle is at the superhero dentist. And then for labels, it's at label free kids.